So, yeah, if you have a question, please do wave your hand, and then I'll ask you to unmute. John, you're up first.
Hello, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sort of elaborating, the idea I've heard that a person can get stuck in their meditation and how that differs from the more standard idea that we all have that, these things take time, if you can see what I've done there.
I can
And
do it.
and how one can possibly tell the difference if there is one.
Obviously, you have to start by accepting yourself.
Nice.
Good. All right, we've got that out of our system now. Well, I mean, why can I ask you, John? Why would what do we mean by stuck?
I suppose that perhaps that one is not seeing any kind of change in one's experience in meditation, or well, I don't mean change in that ultimate sense, but everything's perhaps always the same. Every meditation session is always the same or feels the same.
It's stabbing me.
I realise what I'm saying there.
So it requires in that case, it would require some wise reflection, because things are always changing. I was talking about the 7 factors of enlightenment before we started the meditation. The 4th is pleasurable interest, which emerges as a sense of fascination in all these apparently very normal objects, these run-of-the-mill average objects like sounds and thoughts and feelings and so forth. And yet there is a sense of absorption and interest in the unfolding of these components of experience. There's pleasurable interest. So if somebody is stuck, it's suggestive to me that they're not including something in their observations. So what do you think that might be? There's one thing in particular, given the example we've just given, that would stand out for me. If somebody is saying that everything feels the same and it doesn't seem to be moving on.
Well, perhaps not noticing transience, not noticing arising and passing of the different aggregates.
What is the quality of finding something uninteresting?
Ignoring.
So what is it that's being ignored?
The present moment?
No, I mean a particular mental quality. If there is a sense that this is always the same and yet things are always changing, right? Is there a particular quality that isn't being acknowledged right there?
I'm not sure.
What about boredom? Or doubt? See, because it's suggestive, it's definitely the case, you're absolutely right, that somebody is ignoring something, and if they acknowledge it, the meditation becomes interesting. But if the thing about ignoring is, it doesn't mean you don't know it's there. What it means is you're not looking at it, you're trying to get past it.
You don't acknowledge.
You don't want to acknowledge it. Yeah. And that would cause a sense of stuckness, because until somebody acknowledges it, they're always going to be trying to get to another place. But as soon as there is the acknowledging of whatever it is, it becomes unstuck. So anyone who notes doubt as doubt, or boredom as boredom, they immediately become interested in it. Right? Yeah. So that tends to be what it is, I think, is that the meditation is simply waiting for somebody to acknowledge something that has hitherto remained unacknowledged.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much.
And that requires a willingness to reflect, to meditate, to set things up, to reflect on a meditation. Eventually that person will see what it is that they're not looking at.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, John. That's a really good question. It also reminds me of the complaint that meditators would-be meditators sometimes make, which is, I'm not learning anything new. What do people think might lie behind that observation or that complaint to the meditation teacher? You're not teaching me anything new. Johnny, is your hand up because you want to answer this, or is it just up because it was up before?
It's the latter, and I'll take it down. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, okay. Oh, I was hoping it was the former.
Sorry.
Liz,
might it be a wish to move on and get on with the next thing?
But if you see, that's not what I had in mind. I mean, it's a very good point, Liz. It is a very good point, but it's not quite what I had in mind.
Okay.
No apology necessary. So, Mark, you've got your hand up.
I was going to say that it was a sign of doubt if the student is saying to the teacher, "You're not teaching me anything new."
But do I teach you anything new?
Sorry?
Do I teach anyone anything new?
No.
Okay, do I?
No.
And yet you find it, well, I hope, you find it useful, helpful, and it helps with the conversations that we have help move the meditation on. But am I actually telling you anything new?
No, I said I was thinking it was doubt because I was imagining that the student would be doubting either him or herself, or doubting the teacher.
Oh, they're definitely doubting the teacher because the teacher isn't telling them anything new. And I'm asking, well, how can it be? Because, you know, if you're committed to this way, you could read. Sorry, somebody's got unmuted. Oh, thanks. You could be practicing. Perhaps you read a book in the early days, and then later on you come back to that book a few months or a few years later, and you reread it, and it's as though you're reading it for the first time. Why is that?
Because your insight, your experiential knowledge of insight has grown.
Okay, perfect answer. So when somebody complains that they're not learning anything new, where are they at with meditation?
They're not doing enough.
They're
More
not
meditation.
They might be sitting down with their eyes closed, but they're not meditating. I know I say I'm contradicting myself because I say there's no such thing as meditation. There is just sitting down with your eyes closed. What I mean is that they're not being given any new intellectual information. It's an intellectual pursuit for them. And no doubt they'll spend their meditation thinking. And if you're not supplying them with new intellectual information, they haven't got anything new to think about. So they become dissatisfied. So when I hear anyone say, "You're not telling me anything new," I know that they're not meditators. It's gone very quiet. Jim. My video has slowed down terribly. It's gone very, very wrong. What I'm going to do...
I was on mute.
Okay.
I was going to say that they're all theory and very little practice, but I think you got it for me. I did have a question of sorts.
Okay.
When I hear this phrase that we use the breathing as our base object, that still sounds to me like you're choosing something. I'm not sure I'm doing that. I mean, I sit down and I look at whatever's there, and yes, there will be breathing. I mean, the major objects are usually feelings in the body, sounds, thinking, and breathing. And the breathing comes in its own time. I don't know if I'm looking out for it, and when it's there, it's there, and when it's not, it's not. Maybe I'm just putting the wrong emphasis on the phrase, but I thought I'd mention that.
Yeah. Look, what's the objective of the exercise?
To see what's present.
In totality, you know. Yeah. Sorry. Go for it.
To see what's present in order to learn from it.
Okay. And what's the tendency of the mind, especially at the beginning of the training?
It follows its habitual patterns, and which can be seeking pleasure or can be pushing out unwanted things.
Okay. Would it be helpful to have somewhere, a base to bring the mind back to?
Certainly.
That's why in Vipassana, we're not doing samatha, we're practicing Vipassana. It's a difference. So you have that place to return the attention back to as your anchor or your base. Seems like a very helpful thing to do. Are you making a choice? Yeah. But from that place, do you then practice choiceless awareness? Meaning that if something cuts across, as it were, the breath, some other object becomes apparent and the mind turns to it, what we're saying is we allow for that turning away from the breath and choosing that object.
All right.
That you haven't gone wrong, because it's not about just being on the breath. If it's about just being on the breath, then you're doing samatha practice. Now, it's absolutely the case, samatha meaning calming. Absolutely the case that people need an element of samatha in order to do vipassana. So it makes sense for people to find the breath, to choose to look at the breath, to maybe count with each pull of the in-breath, count 1, and then there's the release of the out-breath, and then the next pull inward, you count 2, and then, because that's helping to calm the mind and to develop focus. But then you find that you get to the count of 2 or the count of 3, and the mind has gone off onto some hindrance, some fantasy, you have not gone wrong. That it's an inclusive practice, and you then include that habitual tendency, you acknowledge it, and then bring the attention back to that base. So you've always got somewhere central to bring the attention back to. And then, as a consequence of developing both the ability to retain the attention on the breath and deal with extraneous objects to that, you find that you're able to observe the arising and passing away of things. So. Otherwise, what we do is, and that's why I asked the question, why are we doing this? Because if you understand your purpose, then you don't get confused by the idea of choice and choicelessness, because you understand what the overarching purpose of the exercise is.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim.
Okay.
My video is now crawling along. I don't know what's going on, but literally, I think I'm going to have Jim's face for the rest of the evening. Mandy, hello.
Hi, Paul, and everybody. Yes, I was in this practice. I was a bit fighting with myself. I don't know what I did, but my mind went to an object, or to the itching and the sensation on my head. And I was wondering, I was suddenly kind of focusing on, how long do I stay with this feeling? I can explore this quite a long time. I can go back to the breathing. I can go with the sound that I heard as well, or go. So I was a bit doubting what to do, and I noticed that more time. So how long do you stay with the object? When do you go back? Sometimes there's so much to explore, but am I then dwelling in or too much focusing on something? So yeah, can you say something about it?
Yes, I can. And you said the word. What is the one thing you hadn't noted? So you noted the itch, you noted the possibility of going out to the sound, you noted that
yes, I was also noticing, so should I label it, or should I stay with the sensation?
Okay, what are all these questions?
Analyzing.
What another word? You used it before.
Did I say that? No, that's not what you meant. I don't know. Analyze, yeah?
Yeah, you said it. You said the word. What are all these questions? Should I be here? Should I be there? Should I be doing this?
I call it analyzing, too much analyzing in the head. So what should I do? Doubt, or
that's the word.
Yeah.
That's the word. That's the word. Does it matter how long you stay observing something? Can I tell you that this evening in Bradford and Avon, it's a bank holiday, so they had some live music down in town. So when I was meditating, somebody was doing, I can't remember the name of the song off the top of my head now, but it was like this really awful rendition of a blues song. It was awful. That was what the mind just kept turning back out to there. It was just, this music again and again, but going back out to it. Oh yeah, it was a rendition of Knocking on Heaven's Door, but instead of doing all the lyrics, they just repeated the words knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door, which I thought was appropriate because I was doing samatha meditation. But at the same time, the mind was just kept adverting to that. There was no doubt, because it was like, well, that's where the mind has gone. Life doesn't make mistakes. So the mind adverts to what it adverts to. It goes where it goes. You can't make a mistake in meditation. So the point, Mandy, I'm trying to make is, if you decide to watch the itch, you can watch the itch for as long as you want. If you're looking at it and noting it and observing the tendency of that sensation to move and change, by looking at it, you're able to define what is a tactile sensation and what is a perception. What is the base upon which that tactile sensation is arising? What is consciousness in that experience? There's so much more available to you because you're free of the threat of having to get somewhere. And you're able to relax and explore what is there. So it's really about just accepting the arising of that questioning and being able to recognize it and include it. It's doubt. And that's not that's neither good nor bad. It's just what it is. Does that help? I can't see you on the video, so
sorry. Yes, I'm thinking.
All right. I'm not getting any body language, you see.
No, it does help, but it's still, I guess, and maybe I'm then being too strict on it, thinking like I shouldn't be staying too long here.
It's not about strictness. It's about understanding what we're doing, why we're doing it. So it's a clear comprehension of purpose. So our purpose is to explore conscious experience in order to understand it. So gaining insight into the components that go to make up an experience, so aggregates.
Yes.
And to be able to recognize the universal characteristics of transience, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self. So seeing the transient and conditioning nature of these components.
Yes.
So if we understand that, time doesn't come into it. So you can, so for instance, another example was like when I was in training, we get, I'm sure you'll remember, we get ambulances coming through the town.
I remember.
And they obviously have their sirens going as they come through the town. And over time, I was able to discern subtle changes in the reverberations of the noises dependent on where they were in the town. So if they were coming up through a very narrow part with very tall buildings, you got a different resonance from the sound of the siren than you did if they were in a very sort of expansive part of the town where there weren't many tall buildings. The point being is that I was able to stay with the sound of the siren and observing how perceptions would arise, telling me where the sound was coming from. I wasn't at all concerned that I wasn't on the breath. I wasn't at all concerned about anything because I was exploring what was actually there.
Is that is for me is a bit, I find that also a bit tricky to hear. But I mean, how can I say? What you're doing then, in my opinion or my experience, then I judge myself about, okay, I'm thinking too much about this because now I'm labeling the sound to the street.
You can't go wrong in meditation. It's not that you've gone wrong, or it's not that something's happening that shouldn't be happening. It's that you're creating a narrative telling yourself that something shouldn't be happening, or at least suggesting that maybe you're not doing it right.
But too much thinking then can happen very easily.
Well, all you're doing it, yeah. But it's the point at which you become aware. It's the point at which you become aware of the thinking. That's your golden moment. That's a perfect moment of meditation. You want that. You want that. You don't want to control it. You want it. You want it to express. You want, whether it's external or internal, gross or subtle. You want experience, internal, external. You want experience to express itself, so that you can understand it. And if that means is that you run the risk of the mind going off track and getting into thoughts and losing the purpose, that's fine. How long will that possibly last?
Yeah, half an hour.
Okay, well then that's when you become aware that it's been half an hour, you note it, you know, any painful feelings that come with it, and you know, when you write it up in your journal, you reflect on that. And then perhaps when you see, because it's not that you got distracted, it was that you hadn't set the practice up in such a way that it didn't matter if you got distracted.
Yeah.
Because if you're not bothered about being distracted, if you set it up, whereas there's no such thing as distraction, it's just the mind becoming interested in something else, and you're inclusive of that possibility, then when that habitual thinking does start up, you are so much more mindful of it and accepting of it, and it's so much easier then to acknowledge it and then let it go. But if you treat thinking as the enemy, you're giving it power.
Yeah, true.
If you're saying it's even possible for thinking to take you away from meditation, then it's going to have a power over you.
Yeah.
And you are far more likely to spend half an hour in thinking.
Yeah.
So it's the way we set the practice up, and we set it up to be inclusive of everything. There is no wrong object in meditation. And as a result of that, you are far more likely to be comfortable when thinking arises. So you're not setting up this thing of saying, I can't let thinking interfere with my practice.
Hmm.
My food for thought.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very helpful.
I'd love to be able to see everyone's
Yeah.
faces, and so I get a sense of whether you've understood me or not. So I can't actually see you now. It's completely frozen at my end. So if you could just say something just to confirm that you've understood or something, that would be really helpful. But is that all right, Mandy? I mean, there's food for thought there, I think.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's very helpful. I needed to maybe be reminded of this again. Thank you very much. Yeah.
We all. That's why regular interviews is really important, because you can have a conversation, and like I said to Mark, it's not like I'm telling you anything new. I haven't said anything new. It's all right. You find new ways of trying to say the same thing, but that's different. But essentially, yeah, you're just reminding people of how to do it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any more questions? Anyone got a question? I'll see if I can find this question that came up before. I just need to change.
I have a problem. I can't see where I can put my hand up, so to speak.
All right, just go for it, Peter. Nice to hear you.
Well, no, that's the question. I would have been happier if I had that option, but I just don't see.
I kind of want Dhamma talk questions, Peter, not tech problems. Thanks.
Right. Okay. There you go.
Could you put yourself back on mute if you don't have a question? Thanks. Has anyone got a Dhamma question? For whatever reason, I can't get at this question that was put on Facebook. My computer is now running very, very slowly, so I don't know what's going on there. Ellen.
Hi, Paul.
Hey.
I'd like to build on what Mandy was commenting on.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of how often my habitual mental pattern I would classify as agitated or busy. And so the pace at which it keeps switching objects, I accept that, but I find it's very unproductive. Okay, so it has a negative tone to it. It's like, and I wonder sometimes if I should just, stop, open my eyes, just look around, settle down. And it's, of course, conditioned by my pace prior to, sorry.
Isn't that what the breath is for?
Yes, correct. And I will then manage, about 1 count.
Okay.
And I'm skittering again. Okay, just
there's nothing wrong with that. Sorry, Ellen, when you say productive in terms of meditation, I don't know what you mean.
Okay, maybe if I said it as
no, I know what you mean, but I don't know what you mean.
Right. I think
what is it you want to do?
Right. To have the pace the switching seems to be so quick that I'm not really able to note. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
You don't
somehow in my mind
you don't have to note everything.
Okay. Thank you.
You just note the most obvious thing. Like for me this evening, noting, this sounds very critical, poorly played blues. unfortunately, was the primary object for pretty much the whole 30 minutes because it was just so overwhelming. But there was no sense in which anything was wrong. There's just the sense in which, okay, so this is the way the universe is expressing itself at this time. So I can note the transient nature of the sounds, observe the sounds arising and passing. I don't have to catch them all. I know the perceptions arising. I know the thoughts like, I know this song. Somewhat garbled version, but I think I know what this song's called. I note those thoughts arising. But there's no sense of urgency because there's nowhere to get to. And this is why I questioned the idea of progress, of productiveness. You're not trying to produce anything.
No, you hit the nail on the head. I absolutely had a view that was, well, I have to label everything. So thank you. That totally cleared it up for me. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think with the tendency also to, like when the mind is agitated and it wants to do stuff, it's firstly you have to really acknowledge that. You have to really acknowledge that tendency of the mind and not seek a solution for it. But in acknowledging it and seeing that it's rat-a-tat-tat, over here, over there, restless, it's just then gently encouraging it back to the breath with the full knowledge that it will run off. And then you very gently acknowledge where it's run off to and then coax it back. And you take the long-term approach, and gradually you are able to master the attention being on the breath for longer periods of time, in which case then there is the possibility of seeing the delight in that and feeling the delight in that and experiencing the delight in that, and it therefore becomes less appetizing to get into all that agitation. The mind prefers just to rest, but it requires this gentle persistence. It's like training it's like trying to train a cat to do anything.
Interpreting cats, yeah. Okay.
So great patience. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, very good.
Okay, now I see people's hands coming and going because my machine is so slow. For some reason, the audio is working fine. I promise to get this sorted out for next time. But if you have a question, please do put your hand up once again, and I'll try to answer it. If you have any other questions.
I think Natalie had her hand up.
Natalie, you had your hand up? Thanks, Roland.
Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Natalie.
I have a question about noting a sense of helplessness and looking at things that seemingly needed doing and feeling very negative about it and feeling very anxious and that I was struggling and that wasn't in the meditation, sorry, that was during the day. And then a bit later, having the same, not quite the same, but the same feeling, unpleasant feeling of helplessness came up again. And then it went and was sort of replaced by, I guess it was acceptance, but it was still a kind of knowing there was very little that could be done. And I just wondered, really what came to me then was, well, this kind of feeling of hopelessness and helplessness must have a negative side to it as well as a positive side to it. And that I know that I've just been sort of vacillating between the two. And all I'm doing is really noting, but sort of came to me, the only way, I guess, I was like, you can't resolve these things. You just can't resolve them. And in some respects, that was really okay. But then I'd lurch back into the helplessness again. I just wondered if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Like if I express it like this, like the universe is unfolding perfectly because it cannot unfold in any other way. In one sense, that means we're redundant, doesn't it? We're helpless because things are going to unfold as they unfold. But when I tell myself that, I feel great. I feel great because any doubt, any concern, any worry is redundant too. Because things are unfolding in the only way that they can. And it is an expression of the endless mystery of existence. So if you're a Vipassana meditator, you're looking at things arising and passing away due to impersonal conditions. So the more you look at these impersonal conditions and recognizing that everything that is unfolding is the unfolding of these impersonal conditions, and yet it creates this existence, this order, this orderly existence. Now, within that orderly existence, you have a chaotic element. Of course, you wouldn't want it to be total order. We need there to be a chaotic element to it. So so it's all about the way that we're choosing to narrate order and chaos. And when we're saying, well, I feel really helpless, I feel overwhelmed by it all, I feel like there's nothing I can do to avert that's one way of looking at it, sure. And so I think we have to assess the nature of the narratives we spin in order to make sense of this phantasmagoria. we have to reflect on the narratives only in the sense of, well, how do I feel as a result of that narrative? And if as a result of that narrative you feel traumatized, or you feel anxious, if you feel like heavy, you have the choice as to whether you persist with that narrative or not. You are perfectly entitled not to believe it. Just because you thought it doesn't mean that it's true. And you're perfectly at liberty to choose a narrative that makes you feel fine about things. That's why I keep saying it's like, reflect on everything that you like about what's unfolding in the moment. An appreciation of what's unfolding in the moment will bring you a lovely sense of peace and calm.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that definitely can happen. Definitely when I change the narrative, definitely.
Well, first thing you have to do is see the narrative. And what is the calling card of a unhelpful narrative? You feel anxious, fearful, heavy, traumatized. And what's the calling card of a narrative that's skillful and brings you into the flow of life and not resistant to it? It's one that brings a sense of happiness, of mystery and intrigue about life.
Yes, definitely. Yes, I think I'm doing a lot of bouncing around from one narrative, and then, a positive one, negative, and then positive. And
But do you see that the bouncing around and the challenge and the difficulty are all part of coming to a greater understanding of things?
Yes,
Because our tendency is to bifurcate. We say, you know, I've been doing all this negative stuff that's been making me really unhappy, and I wish I wasn't doing that because I want to do all the good spiritual stuff that makes me feel really good. And we create this division. But they are both necessary steps. You have to, especially in the Buddha's teaching, you have to be willing to look at the dark side and to incorporate the dark side and to ask the question, why am I feeling heavy? What is it I've been thinking about? And as a consequence of that, you then are able to transform that narrative that produces a different kind of result. Now, you can't get that learning without the dark stuff.
Yep. I definitely. Sorry.
So that's the key. The key is to embrace the totality of the path. Is to embrace the totality of what it is to be a human being. To embrace the darkness as showing you the light. You know, it's a necessary step in order to illuminate the way. You have to be willing to look at that dark stuff with interest, with fascination, as part of your learning, not as something that you're trying to do away with, trying to get free from, trying to stop doing. No. And because you're not fighting that dark side, it doesn't overwhelm you. It only overwhelms because you're fighting it off.
Yeah. I thank you very much. That's so good. That sounds so helpful. Really. I'll keep going with it. Well, I haven't got much alternative.
What choice do we have? I mean, the only choice we have is to deny that we have that side. And how is denying that side going to help us be liberated from it?
No.
So the way you liberate yourself from it, paradoxically, is to look at it. It's to allow for its existence.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mistake that a vast majority of people make. They fall into error. And I think it's a lack of moral clarity. It's the failure to see that the action, whatever the dark action is, does not define you, and it does not define the world. It's seeing, you know, because it's that fear that stops people from truly acknowledging what's there. It's the fear that this reflects badly on me. So people have anger issues. Why? It's not because they do anger, it's because they can't accept that they do anger.
Yeah.
And so the more somebody goes, well, this anger does not define me. It is a quality that occurs. And if I look at it, I am far more likely to be able to restrain than if I'm trying to deny its existence. So you have to accommodate that dark side.
Yeah.
As well as the light. I mean, I'm saying that to everyone, Natalie, not just you. I'm saying it to everyone.
Oh, yeah, I know. No, I definitely feel it's all what can one say, half of the course or whatever it is. I definitely feel in some, yes, as you're saying, right, it feels right. Strangely.
Well, it is right. I am right.
Sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone for any more? Sarah, I know you've been putting your hand up intermittently. Is there something you'd like to say? Did you have a question?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, no, you it's because you kind of talk about what I was thinking, so you already, answer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Thank you. No, it's just really interesting because there is so much in that, what Natalie was saying, what you were saying, and the shadow, looking at the shadow side. And it reminds me of this, someone else was talking about affirmations, and you talked about it at the Q&A on Wednesday, that it's a whole other practice that some people think, oh, you know, I really have to change myself because of all these negative type of thinkings, and they'll practice saying repeatedly, and I know, you know, it has its effectivity, I am happy, I am healthy, I am well, I am beautiful, I am successful. But that is a whole other practice. It's nothing to do with what we're doing, really. And you were saying, yes, you can change your story by doing some metta, doing reflections, etc.
Oh, I disagree, Sarah. I disagree. I mean, I don't, not personally, you know, but I disagree with the idea that it's not part of the Buddha's teaching. I think it falls squarely within four right efforts. What you have to do, if you're going to create positive resultant perceptions of the world, you first have to acknowledge the darker side. You don't ignore it. You acknowledge those other sides, but you're simply preferring a positive narrative that produces positive resultant perceptions. There is absolutely nothing wrong with saying I am, because we're only talking in the conventional sense. So we're saying this, you can say this mind-body process if you prefer, but me seems just as good. So yeah, may I be well and happy is doing precisely that, isn't it? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It is undoubtedly the case that, from experience, I know it to be true, that if you self-talk in that way, you get resultant perceptions arising that confirm that storyline. Right? So what you can actually do is then recognize that the perception coming back to you is confirming what that narrative is. So if it's may I be well and happy, and you're, you know, walking down the shops and you're quite jaunty and okay, and you reflect on that, you go, oh, it really does work. That's creating this positive, that's creating this positive loop, which means, well, I'm getting the confirmation that indeed I am well and happy, so may I be even more well and happy. So you're always preferring the resultant perception that is in accordance with your wishes. So what's not to love about that?
Yeah. Oh, it's fantastic. The whole thing's fantastic. It's just, if we, like you were saying, it's only an issue if we think we shouldn't be looking at the dark stuff and not acknowledging it. That's the only issue.
Yeah. So if the affirmation is being done in such a way which is really a rejection of that dark side, so essentially people are, in a sense, they're saying, may I not experience anger, may I not experience, you know, then they will experience more of that. The more you deny a thing, the more you'll become ever more aware of it. So you devalue the dark by bringing it into the light of your mindful awareness and your mindful noting. And if you do that, you devalue it, which means you're not invested in trying to get rid of the anger or whatever it might be, because you're not at war with it. You're acknowledging it. You're seeing that it is indeed a transient phenomena, which is not me, not mine, not myself, and does not reflect reality. It's just a painful feeling and a rejection of reality at that time. You are devaluing it. It's so much easier then to let go of, and then you can replace it with all these positive affirmations, which will produce resultant perceptions, which can then be confirmed as being, yeah, this affirmation is working, because, you know, I wanted to be well and happy, and I'm observing myself now and I feel well and happy, so it's working, and it just builds on itself. But you haven't denied anything.
Yes.
So it does work.
Great. Thank you. Great.
Okay. Thanks for your question. It was a good one. Does anyone have anything else for this evening? Okay. Well, let's call it a day there then. So thank you very much for your questions, your observations.
Thank you, Paul.
Really enjoyed that. I will sort out whatever's going on with my end of things. I will sort that out for next time, so I can get your facial expressions and your body language as well.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.